Hey everyone, welcome to the InvestorBet NFL Week 7 Tuesday betting preview. It was awesome to see you guys loved the Steelers-Bengals preview from the Friday game. So I thought we'll do another preview for the two games on Tuesday. And I really like these doubleheader Tuesday matches. It spreads the games out a little bit more across the weekend. On Tuesday, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Detroit Lions. And then that game is followed by the Houston Texans at the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to run through both games, give you my view on how I think the game's going to play as to target, how it's going to be played out, similar to what we went through with the Steelers-Bengals. So far, for Week 7, we've won 8 of our 10 bets. You can see everything I'm betting through the link in the description. You can follow all the NFL bets, or you can follow all sports. The NBA season starts up this week. Also, NHL starting up as well soon. And that also includes soccer plays as well throughout the summer. So getting into these games, the first game that we'll look at is Tampa Bay and Detroit. You can see Detroit at home favorites. They're $1.34, laying 6.5 points. It is juiced to the plus 6.5. I'm cautious in the NFL. Whenever you see a favorite minus 6.5 or minus 2.5 right on that key number, it's always a good idea to just be a little bit cautious of that. Doesn't mean they're not going to win by exactly 7 points or anything, but can sometimes definitely be set up as a trap for bettors to think, I'm getting right on the key number, that's perfect, and they're pushing you to take that side. The total for this game is 53.5 points. Now, bringing up the matchup we have, so Tampa Bay, they are currently 5-1. So bringing up the matchup here, firstly, Tampa Bay, the road side here, they lead the NFC South with a 5-1 record. They're 3-0 in road games this season. They've beaten Atlanta, Houston, and Seattle. Keep in mind, though, all three of those wins have been by 3 or less was the final winning margin. They're currently 1 game clear of Carolina, who won earlier today. So Tampa can get back out to a 2-game lead here with a win here. Otherwise, it's back to a 1-game margin for them at the top of the NFC South. Their only loss this season, as you can see here, was against Philadelphia. They lost that game by 6 points. Out of it early, narrowed the margin a little bit in the second half. They're coming off an 11-point win against the San Francisco 49ers, who won earlier today 20-10 against Atlanta in the primetime game. Injuries for the Buccaneers. Their running back, Bucky Irving, is out, so that definitely adds some extra pressure for Rachaad White in the backfield. Their two main receivers in Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka, both questionable for this game. They're more likely to play than not to play, so that's positive there for the Bucs. Their wide receiver Chris Godwin is out though, so they can't afford to be without all 3 receivers. So I do expect Evans and Egbuka both to play in this matchup against Detroit, which is going to be really important for them because Tampa are really going to need their passing game to light up here to give themselves a chance of winning. For Detroit, they're sitting at a 4-2 record this season. They're 2-0 at home. Their 2 home games they've had were a 31-point win against Chicago and a 24-point win against Cleveland. They're currently second in the division behind the Green Bay Packers. They can go to the top of the division, though, with a win here. That'll put them at 5-2, where Green Bay have that tie in there against the Dallas Cowboys. That'll put Detroit just ahead of them. Last week, Detroit lost in primetime against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. They get another primetime game here at home this time around. Kansas City also followed up their win over Detroit with a 31-0 win against Las Vegas, a divisional rival for them earlier today. For Detroit, their only main injury issues are in the secondary on defense. So once again, that opens up the passing game for the Buccaneers. One other important thing to mention for the situational factors for these teams is they both have divisional games coming up next week. Tampa Bay, they play the New Orleans Saints. I don't think they're going to be all that concerned about it with a 1-6 record so far this year. Detroit, they play Minnesota, who's also at the bottom of their division, but that's a more important game in the context of this division. As you can see, it's pretty close. And if Detroit were to lose this game here, then that definitely evens up the division with them playing Minnesota next week. But for this matchup, one of the first things I do is use the NFL Bet Finder tools to look at where the strengths and weaknesses are of these sides. So this allows us to easily compare what they average on the season, also where that ranks in terms of the league. So it gives you context for those numbers, but it also allows you to see where their strengths are against a potential pass rush or rush and pass defenses. And I'm predicting this to be a pretty pass heavy game. I mentioned the key here for Tampa is to be able to throw the ball against the injuries on the Detroit secondary. Both these teams are good rush defenses. If I quickly scroll down here down to the defensive numbers, particularly for the rush defense, you can see they're both in the top half of the competition in their rush numbers. But when you go a little bit deeper into the EPA stats, Detroit are ranked 3rd in EPA per rush, and Tampa Bay are ranked 9th in EPA per rush for their opponents. And both of them are only average EPA per pass this season. Add to that, each of them are both ranked in the bottom 8 in the competition when we look at their pass defense in opponent yards gained per pass attempt and per pass completion. So both Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff can make throws that'll be able to capitalize on this. So for this game, I'm really looking into those pass and receiving markets. Firstly, for Tampa Bay, I want to break them down first. Baker Mayfield, their quarterback, has had 215 or more passing yards in his last 5 games and has also had 29 or more pass attempts in 5 of his 6 games so far this season. Without Bucky Irving, their number 1 running back, Rachaad White's going to be taking those extra snaps, but that overall limits their options in the run game. They can't be as, evenly spread. They're going to have to throw the ball more. When you add the Detroit injuries to their secondary to that, Mayfield should have plenty of passing yards in this game, especially if Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka both play. Kansas City had great success throwing the ball against the Lions last week. And add to that, Tampa Bay being the underdog in this game, if they're chasing points, then they're more heavily reliant on the passing games. The total at 53.5 is a pretty high number. There's not that many games where you see a total over the 50s. So the bookmakers are expecting points. That leads itself towards being a more pass-heavy game as well. I think, first of all, you can play Mayfield's passing yards with a high degree of confidence, especially if Evans and Egbuka play. Egbuka has been Mayfield's main target so far this season, but Evans has missed games with injury. But I think it's kind of even between them to their importance. If at least one of those play, then it should be fine for Mayfield's passing yards overall. I wouldn't play the receiving markets for them individually or either or. Just with those injuries, you don't want them to cop a hit and then be out and then not be able to make their number. Also, Tampa do have somewhat of an even split of their targets this season. They're not one of those sides that are heavily dominant on a particular receiver that gets 30-40% of the target share, or if there's 2 that are getting over 50%, they're not really one of those sides. For that reason as well, I'd rather not play the receivers. Pending late team news, if Evans doesn't get up for this game and Egbuka is in, then you could potentially play Egbuka and play it like that. So that's the only caveat to that. Then for Detroit, they have a really strong run game, and we've known this for the past couple of years now. They have the combination of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. However, this season so far hasn't been as good as last year. Detroit so far are the number 1 EPA per plus this season on offense, and they're ranked 22nd on EPA per rush, both on offense. This season so far, Detroit are the number 1 EPA per pass team on offense, but they rank all the way down in number 22 on EPA per rush this season. You definitely expect them to raise that number with the combination of running backs they have. If Detroit have a substantial lead in this game, then obviously Gibbs and Montgomery are going to be able to pick up yards in that second half, but there's definitely a bit of a risk playing it like that. Obviously, they can both make big plays as well, particularly Jahmyr Gibbs. However, I don't want to play into that too much. There is somewhat of an angle for Gibbs, which I'll get to in a second. However, I think Tampa Bay can hang around in this game and keep pushing Detroit, making Detroit keep on running in points. We know Detroit have won both their home games this season by big margins. I think Tampa Bay will have success. They'll find points and can keep making Detroit score. Therefore, Jared Goff's going to be forced to throw the ball. And as I mentioned, Tampa Bay's pass defense isn't that great. It's definitely easier to pass on them than it is to run on them. Jared Goff had 307 pass yards against Tampa Bay last season. Plus, this year, Tampa Bay, their pass defense is considerably worse in road games. They're giving up an almost extra 2 yards per pass attempt, and the opponent quarterback rating jumps over 20 points in away games compared to their home games. So expect Jared Goff to rack up passing yards, especially if it's close. Both these teams should have an emphasis on the pass game here. For the receivers for Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown is Jared Goff's go-to wide receiver. He's had 45 or more receiving yards in every game, but more importantly, he's had at least 7 receptions in 6 straight games. And overall in the season, he's been targeted 51 times and made the catch 44 times. So an extremely high success rate, plenty of receptions, and if he breaks free at any point, then obviously those yards can rack up. Teams have done a pretty good job at limiting him so far, but the fact he's getting that number of receptions, there's always the opportunity for the bigger play and more yards. So you could definitely look towards him as one of the key receivers. Also, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 119 yards in that game against Tampa Bay last season and was targeted 18 times in that matchup. So you'd expect the Bucs to put a little bit more emphasis on him this time around, but should still have a good game. Also, for Detroit, you have Sam Laporta, the tight end. He's normally good for 3 catches a game. He's had that 3 catches or more in 15 straight games going back to about the middle of last season. Then with Jamal Gibbs, I mentioned him in the running back position. He's also a bit of a threat in the passing game. Also, when you factor in Tampa Bay give up the 3rd most receiving yards to running backs this season, potentially Gibbs' rushing plus receiving market would be a good option. That also helps you be covered regardless of the game script, because if Detroit's trailing and they're trying to make up points, then they're not running the ball as much. You've got Gibbs in the pass game as an option. He might pick up 1 or 2 or 3 receptions, and he could turn that into a 20, 25-yard gain. Then if Detroit's winning and they start running the ball more, then Gibbs is going to take a good share of those rushes as well. So that is a good way of playing Gibbs as an option, as opposed to putting all your eggs into the rushing basket when he is a threat with the receptions, and also Tampa have struggled to defend that as well. For this game, not super strong on the side. I think the props are a better option. Tampa Bay, they're capable of keeping it close if they get their passing game going, which I think they should be able to. But overall, Detroit, the most likely winner with the home field advantage. They're also a lot stronger in their offense right now without the injuries to the running back and also question marks on the receiver. So right now I'd go lean towards Detroit winning this game, but I do think Tampa can push them. The following game is the Houston Texans against the Seattle Seahawks. This is the last game of week number 7. If you like these videos, make sure you like them, leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on these games as well. I'd love to read them in the comments. But for this game, Houston, the underdogs on the road, $2.48, Seattle, $1.54. Seattle laying 3.5 points. So you can see this game, they're on the opposite side of the key number, laying minus 3.5 points. So for Seattle, you need them to win by 4 or more. Honestly, if you were to back Seattle to win by a certain margin here, you wouldn't take the minus 3.5. You'd buy this all the way up to minus 6.5. And if you can quickly scroll down here and find the alternate line market, so alternate handicap. So instead of the $1.90, you can get $2.46 for the minus 6.5, and definitely shop around. Don't just use Sportsbet for that. See which company is giving you the best price, but get on the right side of the key number. Don't take minus 3.5. Get the extra 50 cents and get it to the minus 6.5 if that's the way that you want to go. With Houston at the plus 3.5, you're on the right side of the 3 as the key number there. The total for this game, pretty low at 41.5 points. Houston, they're sitting at 2-3 on the season and coming off the bye. They started their year with 3 straight losses, bounced back a little bit with winning their last 2 games, beating Tennessee and Baltimore. The concerning thing about that is those 2 wins came against sides with offensive issues who were struggling and they couldn't get either the pass or run games going. I think Houston got a little bit lucky with their draw over the past couple of games and still may only be like a 1-4 team overall. But Houston this year, 1-2 in away games. They lost against the LA Rams by 5. They lost against the Jacksonville Jaguars by 7 and then beat Baltimore by 34. sits third in the AFC South behind the Colts and Jaguars, and just about out of the race, especially if they drop this game. The divisional race currently being dominated by Indianapolis, and they're going to be really hard to catch. So Houston can't really afford to drop this game from that perspective, but it's definitely going to be tough for them going into Seattle. Prior to the bye, they beat Baltimore, who were without Lamar Jackson, had a host of other injuries as well. Baltimore had the bye this week, so there's no following form reference for them post that game. No major injuries here for Houston that's going to impact them this week. Seattle, they're 4-2 this season, currently sit third in the NFC West, but with a win here, they can stay in touch with the 49ers and the Rams and move to a 5-2 record. This season, Seattle are 1-2 at home, so haven't really been dominant. They've got losses against a division rival, San Francisco. They lost to Tampa Bay and then won the game against the New Orleans Saints, which isn't like a strong form reference. Last week, they played on the road, beat Jacksonville, who they ended up beating them fairly comfortably. Jacksonville went over to London in the game last night and lost 35-7 against the LA Rams. Jacksonville hardly franked the form there for Seattle, but obviously Seattle's coming off a win on the road. Now they're back at home. Seattle, when you look at their injury report and their depth charts, they're looking pretty good from an injury perspective right now. Looking at how these teams match up, I'll move this over here so you can see it. Seattle, they're the number one pass defense. You see, firstly, they're the number one yards per play. Majority of that all comes from the passing game. They're the number one pass team in the NFL from an EPA perspective, and also rank 31st in EPA per rush. So they have a heavy reliance on their passing game behind Sam Darnold. Houston are a good defense, though. Their defense numbers are very solid. Look at their overall defense there. Rank high in majority of categories. They're also a better pass defense than rush defense. However, I don't think that's going to stop Seattle throwing the ball. Like, it'd be crazy for the Seahawks to go away from what has been working for them and helping them win games. And when you dive into the numbers a little bit deeper, Houston struggled to get pressure to the quarterback. Come down here to their pressure and hurry up rates. They're both fairly low, and protection for Seattle should be able to give Darnold time to make the throws that we've seen so far this season. Houston also give up a higher completion percentage in away games this year. So Seattle, who are capable of making big plays, potentially could catch out the Texans here with a few big plays through Jackson Smith and Najigba. Houston ranked 20th in opponent yards gained per completion. If we come back up here, yards gained per completion, Seattle number one in the competition. Those big plays, they can rack up yards quickly. That's good for Darnold's passing yards and also for the receiver in that situation. Smith-Njigba is the number one wide receiver for Seattle. He's having a huge year so far, 79 or more yards in all 6 games, and 4 of those he's had over 100 yards. The other one was a 96. No doubt Houston put a lot of emphasis on him here, but doubt they can completely stop him. Considering like Houston have given up big plays, the question is, do they try and limit the big play, drop people back a little bit more and not get beaten over the top? Then in that situation, that opens up space for the shorter passes where Seattle can utilize Cooper Kupp or even AJ Barn, who's having a pretty good season, making the most of a few opportunities. Like he turns a couple of catches a game into 20, 30 yards, which is really good. Houston are good at defending tight ends, but with that emphasis on Smith-Njigba, who that combination in the passing game could be the difference between Seattle winning or Houston being a chance in this game. If they give up a big completion or 2 of them here, then that breaks the game wide open because Houston don't really have many points in them. They rely on their defense to make games competitive. Smith-Njigba has had a 40-plus yard completion in 5 of 6 games so far this season. So far, teams haven't been able to stop it. It's going to be interesting if Houston are going to be able to. But I think even against this pass defense, Houston will still generate yards through the air. They'll still remain pass first. There's no major use rushing the ball, particularly against the Houston rush defense. Seattle should just stick with what has already been working for them. For Houston, kind of similar situation. I can't see them running the ball here at all. Seattle are a top 2 rush defense, if not the best rush defense. And so far this season with Nick Chubb at running back, Houston haven't really been able to get the run game going much. Tennessee was the only game where they put up decent numbers, but that was a game they won 27-0. And Chubb and Marks had a combined 30 rush attempts in that game. I think they finished with combined 116 rushing yards. So therefore, the question is, can Houston have success passing the ball? CJ Stroud has historically struggled in away games over his, what has been only 2.5 year career so far. This year, his away numbers aren't as bad as they've been in previous seasons. So there's a little bit of hope there. And if Houston can get their passing game going here, then they're a chance of winning this game. But otherwise, Seattle will win barring turnovers. Like, if teams make too many turnovers and give up good field or short field position to the opposition, then you can obviously get beaten. But for this game, don't think Houston are going to be able to run the ball against Seattle, so they need to be able to have success passing. Otherwise, it's just going to be a little bit too much for them to do. Houston do have quite a big list of potential receivers when you look through the players that have made catches for them. So that makes it a little bit difficult to target which players are going to get the decent share of targets in the game and then try and turn those into receptions. That's one thing you really want to pay attention to with when you're backing wide receivers, tight ends, or even the running backs for their reception is how many targets are they going to get and what the share is, because you only get so many passing plays for an entire game, especially if the team is leading. In this case, I think Seattle's more likely going to be the team leading this game. But you're only going to get so many pass attempts throughout a game. If you've backed a receiver and they're only going to get targeted 2, 3, or 4 times, then they really need to make use of those opportunities. For Houston this season, Nico Collins has been the main go-to, but he's still only been getting 7.2 targets per game. For this matchup, for Houston to win, and with what they're going to need to do from a passing perspective, he should get at least 10. Dalton Schultz is the other who plays tight end. He's averaged 37 yards a game this year. He should be able to grab a few catches as well. But overall, for this game, I'll be looking into Seattle to win. Plus 3.5 is also a good option for them. I think they're going to have a strong reliance on throwing the ball. So Sam Darnold mixing it up with the receivers there for Seattle as well. I'd also say Houston, they're going to struggle to run the ball. So the unders on Nick Chubb, or just avoiding Houston's running backs altogether, because it's going to come down to whether Houston can have success throwing the ball. Like, matchup wise against Seattle, there's a chance they can, but can Houston make that happen? Over the years, like, Seattle's one of the most hostile environments. CJ Stroud has struggled on the road. He's also never played here. So the crowd could also have an impact on this game, get involved to help the Seahawks get over the line and tie up that division once again, which kind of does set up a really good race there for the NFC West. So those are my thoughts on the 2 games for Tuesday. I really hope you enjoy these videos, and from the main part about this is to really get you thinking of how you want to go through and analyze these games, as opposed to just randomly putting a bet on or being a little bit unsure and making decisions based off what the odds are. Really create a narrative and a theory into a game and use that to determine which way you want to bet, which players you want to back. And the really good thing about betting on NFL, there's so many markets you can bet into. You're not limited just by a few markets, and you really have to work your way between those. You've got all the different players, all the different actions they can have in the game: rushing yards, passing yards, receiving yards. I went through all this in another video a couple of weeks ago. But then you have the alternate markets for those as well. So it gives you a whole list of options. And even when you're playing player props, don't just look at what the main bookmaker line is and say it's set at 75.5. Look at what the alternates are, not just on the lower side, also on the higher side, as well as there can be value there, particularly with certain matchups that you can find throughout the season. And as the season progresses, like right now, the reason we're really starting to pick up the wins in the NFL is there's more and more data becoming available of how these teams are playing this season. In those early weeks, you're factoring in last year and a combination of the new lineups for teams this season. But as they become more predictable in how they play, how often they run, how often they pass, and their strengths and weaknesses, you can really look to target that. So that's what sets up the next couple of months to be really profitable in the NFL. Thanks guys for watching. Good luck with your bets, and I'll see you in the next video.